Hello, everybody, and welcome to Catholic Charities of Oregon's Facebook Live event on migrant children and the border crisis. My name is May Lowe, and I'm the Chief of Staff here at Catholic Charities. I will be your moderator today. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I've aged about 10 years in the past few weeks, just from everything that's going on around immigration alone. And there have been so many different facts, circumstances have changed so quickly that I just don't feel like I can get my head around what's going on. I'm sure most of you out there in Facebook land probably feel the same way. Thankfully, and fortunately for us here at Catholic Charities, we have you guys, seasoned professionals and practitioners on the ground who know what is actually going on around this border crisis, and especially around what's going on with the unaccompanied children and the separated children. And we're here to really just ask you questions and tap your brains about what's happening and have you guys give us the facts. Let me introduce you to my colleagues. Here is Sarah Peirce. She is the lead attorney at Catholic Charities Immigration Legal Services. ILS is our we provide immigration services to low-income immigrants and refugees in Oregon. And we are also the only nonprofit in the state that has a dedicated program that provides deportation defense to immigrants in removal proceedings. We also have Kelsey Kaswani, who is our Director of Refugee Resettlement. She is also the co-founder of RAIN International, which is Refugee Assistance Information Network. Catholic Charities is one of 3 refugee resettlement agencies here in the state of Oregon, and we resettle refugees from all over the world in our state, and we provide them essential services to help them resettle and adjust to their new lives here. Our segment today will cover the following. We will talk about the systems we have in place to handle unaccompanied children who cross the border into the United States. We will talk about how these systems are not capable of handling children who have been separated from their families at the border. We will also talk about the changing policies and legal implications around both of these systems, and what you can do to help migrant children affected by the border crisis. And more than anything, I think we all agree that we're not just here to give you facts, we're here really to reshape the narrative around migration. We want to recognize the dignity of every single person and every family who crosses the border. Think about what they have to go through to make them leave their home country, take this treacherous journey to come to this country, and then face the potential consequences that they face here. We hope that we will be able to help with our words and with our ideas, help to reshape everyone's concept of what migration really means. And we invite you to join us on this endeavor. So throughout this segment, we will be picking a few relevant questions to answer. So we ask that you please submit questions in the comment box. And we are really excited to be here with you. And with that, I'm going to start off with Kelsey. Kelsey, can you please walk us through what it means to be an unaccompanied child and what happens to these children when they enter the U.S.?
Sure. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you, May, for the intro. We want to first kind of walk folks through how the history of the system for unaccompanied children has changed over the course of the last year, and what the purpose of the system was designed for initially. So just a little brief history lesson, bear with us. In 1997, the Flores Agreement, I'm a writer, sorry everybody. The Flores Agreement was passed after years of litigation. And the Flores Agreement really, the purpose of it was to provide basic rights for undocumented, unaccompanied children who cross the border into the US. So this is the definition of an unaccompanied child. Unaccompanied child, okay? Under 18, no legal parent at the time of entrance, no legal status, okay? Prior to 97, children who met these qualifications of an unaccompanied child were removed from the country, put to the first border stop. Were not allowed basic rights. Were held in adult detention centers alone, regardless of age, of nationality, gender, etc. This Flores Agreement really was a child protection act. The purpose of it was to provide dignity, basic rights, and to have children separated from adults and placed in the least restrictive setting. In 2004, the Homeland Security Act was passed. Okay, this required that children who were detained by immigration or Homeland Security were placed from DHS, to the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Okay, so it's the acronym for that is always ORR. So if you hear us talking about ORR, it's the Office of Refugee Resettlement. This is 72 hours, okay?
So basically, when children are picked up at the border by DHS is 72 hours to transfer custody to ORR.
It's really critical that we understand that there's a difference between these two systems when we're talking about unaccompanied children and we're talking about zero tolerance, because the whole system has been impacted. The Office of Refugee Resettlement, the system was designed to, again, protect children and in the least restrictive setting. So there are shelters. There's a network of shelters that have been developed since 2005 all over the country. They sort of recently came into light with zero tolerance being passed. But again, the purpose of these shelters was to reunify children with sponsors who are usually family members, often parents, within the least amount of time. Typically 30 to 40 days was the average stay in a shelter. Again, this is not the Department of Homeland Security. This is not ICE. The system was designed to transfer the custody into a licensed child care setting, okay?
Kelsey, can I ask you,
Sure.
Prior to what's going on in the past few weeks, what were we looking at in terms of children who came over who are unaccompanied children? Like, who were these kids?
Okay.
Like, what were their ages?
Sure. Yeah, so the average age of children who were crossing since 2004, since the system really became robust, was between 15 and 17 years old. Most of the children, the majority, I mean, this system applies to children from anywhere in the world, despite what the myths are. There have been children in care from Belgium, from Somalia, from China, from India. The majority of the children are traveling from Central America, from Honduras, from El Salvador, from Guatemala, up through Mexico, who are fleeing cartel violence. I mean, I would say probably 80% to 90% of the children who cross are teenage boys and girls, largely girls, who are really escaping. I mean, this is a journey that they're choosing to take to flee, right? Flee from the cartels.
And they usually are either sent by their families in their home country to go meet somebody in the United States, or their families have already come to the United States and they're sending for them. Right. So generally these are children who are coming to the United States with a purpose, with someone, at least somebody to meet.
Right. I mean, rarely does somebody travel 2,000 miles on a very dangerous journey without going somewhere. So the children typically have a destination. It's typically a parent or an auntie or a family member. Once they are detained by DHS, the Homeland Security, or ICE, transferred into the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the process is similar to the U.S. foster care system. And again, the facilities are all over the country within 100 miles of a border and an ocean in Canada, count as borders. And they are, again, licensed child care facilities. The purpose of them is reunification. So there's case managers, there's full school systems in each of these programs, mental health counselors, there are outings, there's basketball courts, there are trauma-informed yoga. Most of these care facilities are, have kind of the highest level of child welfare services involved. And again, purpose is for reunification. That's what the system was developed for.
Which is why, even though it's not a perfect system, they're meant only to be in there for a very short period of time.
Again, the alternative to this system is that children don't have rights and are returned to home country. That the alternative to this Office of Refugee Resettlement system is, that's what people keep coming up now is like, well, why are children being held in these shelters? But that's the big question. If there was a reason that this law was passed back in '97,
was to protect the kids.
Exactly.
And while they're in OR custody in these shelters, they are also, there are legal services available to them, and do they generally claim asylum of some kind?
All children who are in the Office of Refugee Resettlement Care have access to attorneys within 5 to 10 days after arrival, I believe. All children have access to, are given a Know Your Rights presentation, are provided with legal assistance during their stay. You can jump in on the specifics of what most of the children are applying for.
Right.
Yeah.
They might be applying for asylum, but there's other forms of relief they might be eligible for. I think that the fact that they have access to attorneys is the most important thing. And I think what you said before about the fact that it's not a perfect system, there are lots of issues with the way that things work, but that's any large system.
Any 24-hour institution.
Holding many people and many individuals who each person is different and trying to keep that many kids safe and in one place or various places around the country. It's not going to be perfect, but the alternatives, as we were discussing before, are really dangerous and scary.
So I think what we want to talk about now is, and so then when a child is released to a sponsor, again, they're typically family members. There's a whole process involved in that. It involves fingerprints and background checks and birth certificates and marriage certificates and IDs and photographs and home studies if there are any sort of trafficking concerns or any history of abuse, etc. There are home studies. There are post-release services involved and put in place if certain risk factors are identified. And I think the real key that we want to drive home here is that this was designed as a humanitarian program. Again, under the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the same types of contracts that we work with in our resettlement programs and our refugee programs, the same office, federal body. It's really the only federal system that exists right now for these types of humanitarian purposes. It has the Office of Trafficking in Persons, who contracts within it. This is the ORR is a specific branch of the government that has been really systemically dismantled over the course of the last year, as I'm sure many of you are aware, and many of you are concerned about with all of the developments around targeted migrants, laws against migrants. I'm not saying that right, but you guys can jump in. You know what I'm saying. And so, this is a really, we're in a humanitarian crisis at this point. And our real hope today, I think, as we continue, is to really funnel the outrage to the policies, because the shelters where these children, these shelters have been in operation for over a decade at this point, most of them. There are very, it's a robust system. Again, they're not perfect. They're 24-hour institutions, but the hope is today and most of our work and how we have conversations with people about this is really to focus on those who are making those policy decisions, because that is what is trickling down and making this system almost obsolete at this point.
And I think I think there's a lot of confusion because things are changing so quickly and people don't know about this system necessarily for, safety reasons for kids to, things like that. But that this system was for people who are children who are arriving without parents. It wasn't built to take kids who are being separated from parents. It was for kids who are coming without parents who needed protection. Right. And it's been around for a while. And I think when people first learn about it, they're like, oh, kids who are alone, they must have been ripped from their parents. But it's actually the current system ideally is working to reunite kids with family members at the very least, if not parents.
Right. And if we think about the children who are traditional unaccompanied children and the age group that we're dealing with, the people, they have at least a modicum of sophistication to understand when somebody's explaining to them what know your rights means. Like they know a phone number that they can contact to reach out to their sponsor. They understand what it means to say, okay, tell us about your fears from your country. And this system was set up to take care of those children. Now we have a different system where people who are coming across the border, family groups, family units who are coming across the border, the adults are being taken and detained one place, and the children of all varying ages are being taken and detained somewhere else.
Do you want to talk about
zero
tolerance?
And put into this system, And I think there's a lot of confusion about zero tolerance as a term that people are saying zero tolerance means taking kids away from parents. That's not the point of the policy, but that is the result of the policy. So that zero tolerance, meaning that everyone who comes across the border, not at a port of entry, is going to be charged with the crime of unlawful entry. And so once they're charged, they're put into criminal proceedings for those charges. And they're saying then we have to take the kids away because they're being charged with a crime and put into this system, which is not prepared for that.
Right.
Many kids to come into it, and so then they're like, well, let's build more places. And obviously this is changing quickly because there's been the recent executive order, which I can talk about a little bit more, and the recent yesterday court decision from the federal judge saying that family separation as a policy cannot happen and that the kids need to be reunited. So those are all things that are quickly changing, and I can touch on those again. But basically it's the zero tolerance policy that everybody's going to be charged and prosecuted. And prior to this decision, that was not the case. And this can get into the weeds really quickly and really complicated. I'll try not to. But basically, people who were coming across the border and were either if they were from Mexico, they could be voluntarily returned to Mexico, fingerprinted, detained briefly, returned to Mexico. From other countries, they would be, detained and put into expedited removal proceedings. And people who were coming over and over and over again and becoming an issue where ultimately many were charged with unlawful entry, the actual crime, which is a misdemeanor of entering the country without permission. And so there were all those different options. And so the previous policy where very few people were charged with that crime and detained and put into criminal proceedings.
So Sarah, let's clarify. The law has always been on the books, but the policy was not to charge families who are crossing the border. And can you tell us how that kind of the Flores Agreement and how that policy it came out of the Flores Agreement?
The policy
of not detaining families together forever and ever.
Because the Flores Agreement, part of protecting children, limits the amount of time that they can be detained, and that they have to be held in the least restrictive circumstances possible. And so part of that would be that if families were coming in together, that they wouldn't charge them with the crime, so that they wouldn't have to detain the children, which was not allowed. At one point, even in the last administration, there was a period of time where there were people coming and they were trying to detain them and then remove them as quickly as possible. And there was a big fight over that, and it was determined that you can't hold kids that long in detention centers. A lot of people had to react and go down to those detention centers and fight on behalf of those people who are being detained with their kids. And so that policy was ended. And so that isn't happening anymore.
Let's just be really clear about this. Because I think, this can be a lot of this for people who are new to this. But I think that what we've been seeing, at least coming kind of repeated over and over again, is that there is a law and it's just being enforced now. And we just want to be very clear that there is no law in any book in any country that requires the separation of children. It doesn't exist. And so repeating the fact that the Flores Agreement, which was ultimately case law that was passed to protect children, the basic children rights, the basic rights of children, hold them in the least restrictive setting, has now been really manipulated into being the cause for the purpose of separating children. And that is not the intention. That was never the intention. In fact, the Flores really provides kind of a floor map, if you will, for how the shelters have been operating all these years. And I think it's also worth mentioning too that the reason that nobody knew about these shelters is really because they were kept confidential. These are children, first and foremost, which have again, basic rights of dignity and of confidentiality and of privacy and protection. And also because the narrative in this country is that the general narrative around migration is that it is bad if you are undocumented. And so it's really up to us as a country to be very pointed in our language, to know the difference between a migrant, an immigrant, an emigrant, a refugee, an asylum seeker, and really be able to humanize as much as we can, and every day in our words, how we address people who use words that are dehumanizing and othering, and it is up to us. We have to take that responsibility ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just to kind of quickly continue, and House Floor's agreement, how the zero tolerance, when children were being separated and justifiably, by this policy and by this is a policy, and the children were then reclassified as unaccompanied and pushed through the system that had already been in existence. Of course, the system became overwhelmed. The system was not designed for children who'd been separated from their families after arriving in the country, right? And again, now there's been a lot of technicalities even within the reunification process that have really prevented children from being reunified. For those of us who worked in this field for a long time, who worked with those who are undocumented, who worked with migrants, who worked with people kind of on the fringes of society, it is really heartbreaking to see that the folks who are social workers, who are counselors, who worked with worked within these systems, being seen as the problem. We're all kind of part of this problem, and we all need to really kind of be a part of the solution too. And again, redirect that outrage. Yeah. Anything else to add on that piece? Yeah.
Not on that piece. I think one of those recent changes that we were talking that is like constantly changing is the decision yesterday from the judge that people have to be reunited with their kids within a certain amount of time. So children over 5 have to be reunited with their parents within 30 days, and children under 5 have to be reunited with their parents within 14 days. And everybody who's not currently in contact with their children and parents needs to have at least a phone call within the next 10 days. I think it'll be interesting to see how that's things are changing so quickly day to day. There's a new decision, there's a new order, and all of those things are separate, right? It gets a little confusing because it's like there's a new executive order. Does that change everything? And people, it's hard to understand that an executive order is different than a law that's passed through Congress, which has a certain effect, versus a decision that's made by a judge that has a certain effect. And so all of those are different areas, different branches of the government, literally. And so just understanding that difference, and that the decision saying that we're not going to separate kids anymore the executive order from the president didn't reunite the kids with their parents. Right. The hope is with this new order from this judge that they will be reunited, and that with the injunction that no more families will be separated. But that just happened yesterday, so we'll have to see how that's implemented.
And I think it's important to note that, obviously we're all very concerned about the children and what is happening with them. But on the flip side, the adults, their parents, a lot of them are being held. Some of them are being held without being charged. Some of them are being charged but held and not given access to attorneys, and not given access to immigration attorneys. So there's so many roadblocks to access these adults, these people. So if they don't have access to attorneys or the outside world, what are the odds of them actually being put in contact with their children? And mind you, there is no system in place, as we know of right now, that actually links the parents and the children together. So, the parents are, and so here in Oregon, we have a facility down, a federal facility down in Sheridan, where we have 121 men who are being held right now. There are a number of these men who were separated from their children at the border. And we've only recently, within the last day or two, been granted access to go visit these men, to give them Know Your Rights trainings, and to be able to represent them. So when were they ever going to be reunited with their families?
They've been there for over a month. They were saying that they've just been there not knowing, at least the ones who were separated from their children, whether when or where.
Yeah, they have no idea where they are here, much less where their children are. So
this is one state. I mean, there are 50 states, right, in this country. And so there could potentially be any number of federal detention. And again, remember, there's a kind of a before system and an after system. The before system was not perfect, but the after system is a humanitarian disaster. Right. So after zero tolerance and people started being charged with crimes, they became detained. And because the detention centers that were designed for immigration filled up so quickly, they were not meant to have hold everybody who crossed the border. They started contracting with federal prisons and other prisons around the country to hold immigration detainees who have been charged with misdemeanors, right? And so if, and this is, we are giving this example of what happened in Sheridan, Oregon with a federal prison that was sort of, placed immigration detainees in. But if you're in another state and if you haven't heard what's going on in your state, and you're an attorney particularly, this is really important to start kind of advocating for, because there will be people, the systems, again, like both May and Sarah mentioned, they are bureaucracies, massive bureaucracies, and the Office of Refugee Resettlement, where the children are held in licensed care facilities, and the ICE detention centers with the Department of Homeland Security, they were never meant to be, they were never meant to interface. So when the zero tolerance passed, all of this just happened. So I think the real goal, hopefully, for us is to really be, to kind of put that onus on you to be advocates within your own state and find out what's going on, where are the adults being held, and to help really start facilitating the reunification of the children who were separated.
And I would say that, DHS has contracted with federal facilities all over the country for a long time now to house people. They move people around the country to different facilities if there's not based on bed space, and that's something that has been happening for a very long time. And I think that something to think about with that is a lot of people are saying, well, the answer is we have more people to detain, we need to build more prisons, we need to put people in more places to put the people. But one thing that's not really being discussed that I've heard widely is what are the alternatives to detention. Like, this is not the first time that we've had people who are in immigration proceedings who are going to immigration court, and what are the alternatives to it? It's not just put people in a detention facility or a prison, putting like children and adults in a federal prison, or letting them wander free into the country never to be seen again. Those are not the only two alternatives. I think that and there are lots of alternatives that are already in effect, that are options that are currently there are options to have a bond where a family member or a friend who's a lawful permanent resident or a U.S. citizen can pay a bond for that person to promise that they will make sure that person goes to their immigration hearings. There are check-ins where they have to check in a certain number of times, every month, every couple of weeks, every few months, to say, I'm still at that address I gave you, I'm still here, I'm going to go to my hearing when it comes. And there's also things like ankle monitors and things that are currently being used.
Case management.
And there was a program that was recently ended that was a family case management program where the families that came in seeking asylum, they were given their court date and they were given a case manager that would help them remember to come to their court date, help them understand what that process was, and in their own, language that they could understand, so that they would show up at their court dates. And that program had 100% success rate of people going to their immigration hearings. It wasn't just, okay, we're just letting everybody wander and telling them that they have a court date in a few months and hope they show up. There are ways to make sure that people come to their court dates. And especially, I think it's important to remember, people who are applying for asylum, they want to get asylum. So they're going to come to their court date and fight their case and try and get it, because that's the protection that they need to be able to stay here. And if you don't go to your court date, then you're ordered deported in absentia or without being there. And so, and that order hurts any future case you might try to have. And it hurts your ability to, if you're picked up by ICE, then you're just immediately taken out of the country without a chance to see a judge. And so people want to go to their court dates and fight their case and win, versus just wandering off and being undocumented without any sort of protection.
Right, absolutely. Especially if they're here with their families.
Right.
Kelsey was saying what people want the most is just to have a regular family life. And people don't make this journey for fun. It's not a vacation for them. There's a reason why they're here. It's because whatever is going on in their home country is so dire that they feel the need to move their entire family to come to, again, take this journey to come to this country. And whether or not you whatever opinion you might have of the immigration system, that's the very least that we as human beings need to understand, is that this is not a journey that people want to take for fun. This is a journey that people take for survival. And I don't know if I would have the courage to do something like that. So, you know, like, I think we really need to give them the recognition of they are just trying to make a better life for themselves.
Well, it's 12:30. I think we're going to try and wrap this up. We said it'd be a half an hour. So did we
Do you
have any questions?
Yeah. Recommendations?
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I know you guys have received a great amount of information. This video, I believe, will be made available for future viewing on our Facebook page. So go to Catholic Charities Oregon and a Facebook page, like us, please. And you can access this video, share the link with your friends and your contacts. This video will also be shown on the RAIN Facebook page. So go and like RAIN. RAIN is a wonderful organization, and we really support the work that they're doing. And now you might be asking yourselves, what can you do? And so here are some things, I'm sure you've heard of them, but we would just like to reiterate. These are things that you can do. Continue to educate yourselves on these issues using reliable sources. We will be posting some of these sources on our Facebook page, as well as on the Catholic Charities Oregon website. So please go to them and just learn about what is going on. It is really important that, you know, you are here. That means that you're already interested, your heart's in the right place. Let's get some real facts and start disseminating those facts.
You know, something we talked about earlier, and it's worth repeating,
Yes.
is that repeating things makes them, if you repeat, right? The saying
adage.
is if you repeat a lie enough, it becomes the truth. And that's what we're seeing happening, right?
Right.
So we need to repeat the truth so that it is the truth,
Yeah.
right?
We need to
First,
reclaim this.
We need to know. We need to go
Right.
back to kind of the core, and then learn how to reframe migration so that it is a positive thing. It is not a dehumanizing thing. Have professional courage is something we talk about. You know, have the courage to stand up. And you know, as an organization, as a company, as a professional too, in your environment, because when we can do this together on a larger scale, the narratives will start changing. They'll start following us, right? But we have to know the truth first. And so, you know, we will be posting a list of reliable sources that we've trusted. Yeah, it's already posted.
Yeah.
I just been told.
Very efficient.
And then we will post it on the RAIN webpage or our Facebook page as well. But do follow these, learn the plights, learn the stories, learn just the facts, and learn the nuances too, you know?
Unfortunately, we weren't able to go into too much detail or we really shade the nuances here. But, you know, we hope that we've given you enough that you can start your journey of discovery.
Yeah.
And as Kelsey was saying, speak up, definitely speak up and advocate for those who don't have a voice. And, you know, just reshape the narrative. It's important to do that. We also encourage you to contact your elected officials. Here in Oregon, I feel like we're very fortunate because we have our senators and most of our representatives are very supportive of immigrants and of all the organizations in our state that do this work. And, you know, they want to hear from you. Like, they like to know that they're being appreciated. So we've done that. We try to give them as much love as possible. And
if you have senators that don't believe in that, definitely start advocating, because they need to hear your voices.
Yes. Good or bad, you need to let your electeds know.
And again, straight to the top also. Straight to DOJ. Yeah.
That was my other point. No, you got it. And that's the thing, like, you know, it's not just your elected officials. At this point, we need to reach out to the administrators of these agencies. You have Department of Homeland Security, you've got the Office of Refugee Resettlement, Department of Justice. Write to them and tell them what you want them to do. You're as a citizen, as a permanent resident of this country, you have the right to ask them to serve you and ask them to account for their policy. So if you know, whatever thoughts you have, channel it there. They need to hear from you as well.
This humanitarian system that we've had under the Office of Refugee Resettlement is being dismantled. And they need to know that we're not okay with that as a country and as constituents. Yeah.
And then the final thing that we would ask you to do is to support your local nonprofit organizations that are doing this work on the ground. As much as writing a check might seem impersonal, and I've heard from many of my friends and family members for saying, but I don't want to write a check, I want to do something. You can volunteer at these agencies and these organizations to work with immigrants and refugees who are already here. And you can write a check. And unfortunately, for your own satisfaction, that might not seem really satisfying, but it really helps. It helps us every single day to do the work that we're doing. Kelsey works in the department, in our refugee resettlement department. Sarah works with Immigration and Legal Services, and we need to know that we have support and funding in order to keep doing this work directly with immigrants and refugees.
And we will post a link of other resources
absolutely,
too. Yeah.
It's not just us. There are lots of organizations in your hometown that do this work. Obviously, we are plugging for Catholic Charities, but do your research. Find an organization that resonates with you, that you know, that you trust, that is doing this work, and definitely support them in all the ways that you can.
Yeah, our office has been getting a lot of calls from people who want to help, who are really concerned about this issue and looking for ways to help. I think that it's a lot of people are asking, like, can I send toys or can I send, and it's like, and what we hear from, we're obviously here in Portland, so we're not at the border doing that work, but what we hear from organizations who are at the border doing that work is that they need, they don't need toys, they need financial assistance or support to help the attorneys who are trying to help those kids and those families. And then if this is an issue that you're concerned about, help in your own community. As May was saying, we have our Immigration and Legal Services program. One of our goals is to keep families together who are in danger of being separated by the immigration system. So our Center for Immigration Defense is working to help people who can't afford other representation, who are in removal proceedings with their cases, so that they're not separated from their families and sent to potentially dangerous situations. And I think that is, if that's something that you feel passionate about, then we would welcome the assistance.
Absolutely.
And the question, sorry, just to jump in, I know we have a few questions we want to get to for folks who've submitted in the comments boxes, both on Instagram and through Facebook. But one thing I want to mention, because we've been asked this a lot, is regarding fostering children who have been separated. And I think our general comment is that if you feel like fostering a child, go out and become licensed as a certified, licensed, whatever, foster care parent.
Right.
Yeah, because there's so much need for foster parents in every community around the country.
I mean, I know here in Oregon, the foster care system is at a crisis level, and we hear about it all the time. And it's they need more, qualified, good family people to help take care of these kids, even for a short period of time. And then we hear about these separations, but then other people who are potentially going to be separated from their children through removal proceedings or other immigration enforcement actions, and that's just going to put more strain on an already completely overwhelmed foster system. So if that's something that you're interested in,
absolutely,
yes, do that.
So we have a couple of questions, and one is, are the options like bonds and ankle bracelets accessible in practice? So Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't work on the border. Obviously, I work in Oregon, so I don't know how often those are used on the border, but those are definitely options. Those are things that are used by the ICE programs that are throughout the states. There are so many people who are in removal proceedings who are bonded out, and they, go about their lives. They check in periodically with an ICE officer at the local ICE office, either in person or by phone call, to verify that they're still living at the same place. And then they have ankle bracelets that have GPS. You can tell where the person is. They can also check in, and that's something that is in effect. Those are programs that ICE uses right now with the people that it's trying to keep track of.
And let's see. So we have another question about what is going on. How are you making distinctions between the established practices of sheltering kids versus some of the specific details about these current families? And what is going on, and how do we maintain pressure towards reunification? My 2 cents is, while the ORR system isn't perfect, the kids are safe for now. And we do need to push towards reunification. But the best way to do that is to ensure that the parents are represented, that the parents are not in detention. And when you put pressure for the parents to be released, that's how the reunification can begin to happen.
I think the biggest difference is that the previous system was that kids who arrived alone, they were alone, and then the current system is that kids are being separated from their parents. That in the previous system, they would have been trying to reconnect them with those parents who, if they were already here. Right. And so that would be the biggest difference, is that they're actively separating those kids from their parents and putting them into this system versus maybe giving them a bond and releasing them with a check-in or an ankle bracelet and letting those people go
as family units.
As a family unit. The parents and the children go to stay with a relative and check in periodically and go to their hearings and fight their immigration case, their asylum case usually, but it could be something else. And that's a whole other webinar. Sarah will put a CLE on that.
We have a lot more questions. Where are we kind of running low on time?
We can address these. Okay. Well, we will look at the questions that you guys have. Thank you so much for submitting them. And we will try and address them as best as we can. We might put on another one of these. We'll see how it goes. But thank you very much for joining us.
And we will have this video also available for sharing, etc., for those who weren't able to catch it live.
So it'll be on the Catholic Charities of Oregon Facebook page, as well as our website, and the RAIN Facebook page as well. Thank you for joining us today, and we just hope that you will come with us on this journey on how to reshape this narrative around migration. Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye.